Now, the challenge with the resume, what I've seen in almost every single resume that I've ever looked at, from high school students all the way up to CEOs, CFOs, and top executives, is that they ramble. They don't say what they mean, and they haven't meant what they said. You want to mean what it is that you write, and the challenge is to keep it clear, crystal clear, and concise. Consider the reader, and you want to make it crystal clear for who is reading your resume. Always keeping in mind the audience, okay? So the audience might be a recruiter, it might be a sales manager, it might be a CEO, it might be any one of the top executives who are looking at it. Those are your audience. So what you want your resume to do is explain who you are and tell a story without you being there to clarify any questions. This is really hard to do, but simple when you think of clear and concise, the 2 C's. So page 1 of your resume should be complete. Now, you will see in some of the templates that I'm going to provide for you, and I've provided a couple options, a couple 1-page options and a couple 2-page options. There is no reason, unless you're going to be a professor and providing a vita to a university, you should never have more than a 2-page resume. It is just not necessary. Now, if you want to have more stuff to show when you're in an interview, I will talk to you about something that you can bring in with you that really shows you differently. And that is called a portfolio. But for now, we're just talking about your resume. And your resume should never be over 2 pages. So on the top, you could put a brief summary, your highlights of qualifications, and your highlights of qualifications are going to be the top skills that you just wrote out a few minutes ago, right? You drafted them out, you've got the problem, you've got what you did, and then you have the results. And then you're gonna look at that and you're gonna say, wow, this really looks like a team building. I really want to be a manager of a team, so team building is a quality, and that's also gonna be a highlight of my skills. So they're going to begin to match. So your highlights will match with the content of your resume. You see, we're going to be showing the reader, here is who I am, here's a highlight, here are some bullets, and then I'm going to explain the bullets as we go down. So it's always say what you're going to say it, and then in your interview, you say what you said. So it's very, very simple. However, most people don't do these things, and that's when interviewers tend to think that there's inconsistency. And you don't want to be seen as inconsistent because you're sharing who you are, and you're on the top of your game, you're the best one for this job, so you want to show that. So you want to be consistent throughout. So one of the questions that I'm always asked in relationship to education is, should that go on the front page or on the back page? You will only put your education on the front page of your resume if, number 1, it's a requirement for the job and they're saying it's a must to have this. So you want to tell your audience that you are checking the block immediately with that information. Otherwise, that goes on the back page. So if you're a senior executive, education always goes on the back page. For somebody who just graduated high school or college and you want to lead with that, you may, but it's not as important as your experience will be. So I would keep it towards the bottom personally. However, there are certain jobs like accounting where that stuff is really important. In fact, that will be important for an accountant to put their GPA on. They look for that. Pretty much every other industry, they don't care even where you went to college. They are just concerned that you have some vocation behind you. So education would always go towards the bottom or on the second page. And here's the other difference. Where you went to school is not nearly as important as what you did while you were there. So if you have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, you would lead with what your degree is in, and then where you got it from, and then the dates. And if you had specialties, you would add that underneath it, but that's not necessary or required. So what you want to do is just make sure you're being clear and concise. And I would not bold everything. So take a moment, look at the samples and see which one feels the best for you. Your resume, page 1, should be good to go. For those of you who have a 2-page resume, this is where you get to say a little bit more. You can add a little bit more meat to your resume, more content of saying who it is you are and what you deliver. So page 1 is done, and then page 2 is going to be, say, continued. The new paradigm, we don't really care where you worked as much as we care what you did and what your role was where you worked. So we're going to put your role first. So sales manager, sales, sales rep, technician, whatever you did, cook, they'll put that there first, then where you did it, and then the duration. So from when to when. And then underneath that, you have an opportunity to share more about what it is that you bring to the table. So what other results do you have that you didn't get to put on page 1 but are still significant enough to add to page 2? That's where you would put it. And it would only be a couple lines, 1, 2, or 3, no more. And then you would go on to your next job. So when you're listing where you did these things at, what you would want to keep in mind is 10 years is the max, 10. So 10 years is all you really want to capture for your experience, okay? So once you have your experience, then you could put on there any awards or certifications. Those would get listed. And again, keep in mind your white space on your paper. You don't want to list it down in bullets because that's boring and it takes up a lot of space and nobody's really engaged to read bullets. So you want to make sure that there's a flow to it. You know, we are from being in sync after all. So we want to make sure there's flow in everything that you're doing. So then you would put certifications and awards and then your education.